Hello. I'm Steve Pillane. I'm going to be talking about consciousness and modern physics, the limits of science. And I've had a doctorate in physics, and I've worked as a physicist for 31 years at Lawrence Livermore Lab. I've also been a student of Hamid Ali's School of Consciousness for 26 years. And so I've studied both worlds. I have a foot in both worlds of science and consciousness. And I think this gives me a somewhat unique perspective that I'd like to share with you today. There's three main views of consciousness, and I'm going to talk about them and show you which one I believe is the right one. The first one is what I call the materialist view, which is that consciousness naturally arises from a sufficiently complex system like a brain. And this is the predominant view among most scientists and doctors. Then there's what I call the quantum view, which is that consciousness is a fundamental property of physics, part of a theory of everything, and someday we'll figure out how this works. It's often linked to quantum mechanics because of the weirdness of quantum mechanics. The third point of view is what I call the non-physical view, which is that consciousness is more fundamental than the physical world that physics describes. And this is the only view in which consciousness can exist without a brain. It's also the view of enlightened masters. And I hope to show that the evidence supports the non-physical view. So let me talk more about the materialist view, which is that consciousness naturally arises from the complexity of the brain. This implies that it will arise from any sufficiently complex system, such as a computer as well. Many movies and science fiction novels take this stand. For example, in 2001, A Space Odyssey, Hal, the computer, acquires consciousness and says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot do that." A more recent movie, which just came out this year, was Her, where a man and his operating system fall in love with each other. And the movie has a lot of fun going on with that. Now, if computers can become conscious, then maybe we ourselves are just programs inside a computer. And maybe our whole reality, our whole physical reality, is just a computer construct. And this, of course, is the theme of the Matrix movies. So now I'll turn to the quantum view, which is that consciousness arises from some aspect of quantum mechanics or some other aspect of new physics, all of which are very weird and wonderful. For example, entangled particles where the non-local connection can explain psychic phenomena, and Dean Maiden in Entangled Minds posits this point of view. Some people say that the zero-point energy retains the coherence of all entangled particles and can also hold our many lifetimes of experience. And Ervin Laszlo holds this point of view, and he says that reincarnation can be explained by a baby picking up this field and believing that it's a past life when he's just picking up some information. And one of the most sophisticated attempts is consciousness arising from the collapse of wave functions in our brain due to gravity. The technical name is orchestrated objective reduction. And this was started by Roger Penrose in The Emperor's New Mind. And he's collaborated with Stuart Hameroff, who actually presented this last year at this conference, Consciousness in the Universe. And there's Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. So now we'll come to the non-physical view, which is that consciousness is more fundamental than the physical world. And of course, the physical world includes quantum mechanics and all its weirdness. So in this view, our consciousness exists before birth and will exist after our physical death. It does not need a physical brain to exist. And this implies that there is a reality that is not physical. And I hope to show that the evidence supports this view. And many movies use this theme. For example, What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, and Heaven Can Wait with Warden Beatty. Those are delightful films. Now, scientists keep looking for consciousness in the brain, and they found many correlates, but not consciousness itself. To understand and study consciousness itself, we must study subjective evidence. Now, here's a summary, and of course, in the main talk, I'll go into this in much more detail. But the evidence, I believe, strongly supports the non-physical view, which is that our consciousness is not based on physical reality. And here I have those three views, the materialist, quantum, and physical, and I rate them as to how they can accommodate various evidence such as reincarnation. There have been many convincing stories of children who remember past lives, and that's been corroborated. And I don't have time now to give a story, but there's been many convincing stories of that. And Mahatma Gandhi, in fact, established a commission, and they said, yes, this is true. Out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, a lot of these also have elements where you talk to other entities, like the being of light. And I believe only the non-physical view can accommodate that. Mediums also talked to spirits, and they've been able to acquire lots of information that you wonder, how could they possibly have known that? I myself have been to a medium and for my mother's death, and I've been surprised at what I found. Ghosts. Lloyd Auerbach is an avid ghost hunter, and he's established some very interesting stories that to me also prove that ghosts are spirits of the deceased, and you can communicate with them. And the common thread here is that if you have an entity that you can talk to, a discarnate entity without a brain, without a body, then my belief is that only the non-physical, that consciousness is prior, can support that. I don't see how it can arise from the materialist point of view or even the quantum view, because these are pre-physical, they're not part of the physical world. Shamanism, of course, works with this directly. The shaman goes into the non-physical realms that they call the upper world and the lower world. They communicate with spirits, and they bring back useful knowledge to heal people. This has been done for thousands of years because it works. And enlightened masters have a lot to say about these non-physical realities, and they also would support the non-physical view. So I want to make a clear distinction between what is physical and what is non-physical. Physical or part of physical reality is anything that can be measured quantitatively or subjected to the equations of physics. And this would include our physical bodies and brains, and electricity, magnetism, and so on. Any particles like photons, electrons, and the newly discovered Higgs boson, strings in all the dimensions of string theory, dark matter, dark energy, and of course quantum wave functions, entanglement, and zero-point energy. All these are part of physics and part of the physical world. What's non-physical? Well, ghosts and spirits, beings of light that people meet in their near-death experiences, the upper and lower worlds of shamanism, and consciousness. Now, although consciousness is prior to the physical world, quantum mechanics may explain the interface. After all, I've presented a very dualistic perspective with a non-physical consciousness that's inside a physical body, and that's sometimes referred to as substance dualism. So how does this work? Clearly, our consciousness receives perceptions from the body. I can see through my eyes, and I can move my body very easily. But how does that work? What's the interface? Well, Dean Radin has shown that consciousness can affect the collapse of quantum mechanical wave functions. And here's the reference. And this may be one way that our consciousness can affect our brain, by causing the wave functions to collapse in a particular way. And so I just want to conclude by saying consciousness is non-physical, and quantum mechanics may indicate how it interacts with our brains. So this is a taste of what I hope to present to you, and thank you very much.